Commander Teo stood in the dark observation room of the space station, looking out at the stars. His skin had a soft purple tint and his large eyes reflected the distant light. He was a Valorian, a species known for their intelligence and beauty. But right now he did not feel intelligent or beautiful. He felt scared. Behind him, screens showed reports from across the Kepler sector. Red marks covered the map, areas that had fallen to the Void Collective. The Void Collective was an empire of machines and warriors. They conquered everything they touched. 15 star systems were already gone. Millions of lives erased. "The council is waiting for you," said a voice. It was Minister Hyri, a human woman with sharp eyes and a serious face. She had come from Earth to help the Alliance. Though many did not believe humans would actually help them. Humans were strange. They were new to space, only 100 years into exploring the stars. But they were also ruthless. Their history was filled with wars and conflicts. The Valorians had studied humanity carefully. Perhaps ruthlessness was exactly what they needed. Teo turned away from the window. "Are they ready to listen?" "They are desperate," Hayri said. "Fear makes listeners out of proud species." The council chamber was large and cold. 7 different species sat around a circular table. There were Valorians, tall and elegant. There were Krons, creatures that looked like giant insects with thinking minds. There were silicates, beings made of crystal and rock that glowed with inner light. There were others too. The Aquari, who lived in water tanks, the Zephyrs, who floated on air, and the small but clever Taurians, who had minds like computers. Commander Teo took his place at the table. Minister Hayri stood behind him, watching everything. "The situation grows worse," said Kroll, the Void Collective representative. "No, that was wrong." Kroll was not here. The Void Collective did not come to councils. They came with weapons. Teo was thinking of someone else, General Vex, who led the Alliance forces. Vex was a Kron and his voice clicked and buzzed when he spoke. 3 more systems fell today, General Vex announced. His antenna moved with agitation. The Void Collective moves faster now. They are not playing with us. They want everything. The Aquari representative made sounds like bubbling water. "We cannot win with our current forces. They have ships twice the size of ours. Their weapons are advanced. Their soldiers are trained for nothing but war. We need help," said Teo. He had been chosen to say the hard words because Valorians were good at speaking difficult truths. "We cannot ask the Galactic Union. They are too far away and too busy with their own problems. The Trade Federation will not help without payment we do not have. There is only one option." Everyone looked at him. "Humans," he said. Silence filled the room. Then noise. Everyone started talking at once. Some silicates began glowing brighter, which meant they were upset. The Zephyrs made high whistling sounds. The Taurians clicked their small mouths together rapidly. "Humans are children," someone said. "They have only been in space for 100 years. "Humans are unpredictable," said another. "We cannot trust them." "Humans are expensive," added a third voice. "They will want payment and it will be too much." Teo waited. Minister Hayri did not say anything. She only watched. "Yes," said Teo. "Humans are all these things, but there is something else humans are. They are fighters. I have studied their history. They fought wars across their own world for thousands of years. They learned how to win. They learned how to survive when things seemed impossible. They learned how to make weapons, and they learned how to use those weapons when they had to. That was against each other," someone pointed out, "not against external enemies." "Yes," said Teo, "but that only means they are good at fighting anyone. Humans do not have the honor codes that we have. They do not have complex rules about war. They look at problems and they solve them. Quickly, completely." General Vex clicked his antenna. "What you are saying is that we need killers." "We need survivors," Teo corrected. "And we need them now." The vote was close, but the fear was stronger than the doubt. The council agreed to send a message to Earth. A desperate message. A message asking for help against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Dr. Quan Su was in her small office when the message was composed. She was a human who had spent the last 10 years studying alien species. She was brilliant but also kind, and many of the aliens trusted her more than they trusted the others. She read the message and her face became very serious. "They are really that scared," she said to herself. Minister Hayri came to the office soon after. "We are sending the message in 1 hour. Earth will receive it in 7 hours. They will respond within 2 days, I think." Perhaps faster if they understand how bad this is. What do you think they will send? Dr. Quan Su asked. Ships, said Harry. Weapons. Soldiers, maybe. Enough to help us hold the line. The message traveled through space on radio waves and through quantum entanglement networks. It was the cry of a dying species asking for help. It was the sound of fear across the stars. On Mars, in the command center of Earth's Space Force, an alarm sounded when the message arrived. Admiral Jiwoo was not there at that moment, but he was called immediately. Within minutes, the entire military leadership of Earth was reading the message. The words were clear: "Come help us or watch us die." The room was silent as everyone understood what they were reading. The Void Collective was real. The threat was real. And now, for the first time in human history, another civilization was asking humans to fight a war that was not on Earth. Admiral Jiwoo stood up. He was a man in his 60s with gray hair and tired eyes that had seen many things. "Get me a detailed report on this Void Collective," he said. "I want to know everything they have done, everything they own, and everything they can do. And I want to know the fastest way to reach the Kepler sector." His orders spread through the military command. Ships were checked. Weapons were loaded. The Dreadnoughts, massive vessels that had been built as a distant dream of protection, were now being considered as a real tool. Commander Teo waited in the observation room again, looking at the same stars. But this time something felt different. Help was coming. Not help that he could see yet, but help that was being prepared in a world very far away. Help from a species that did not make promises they could not keep. The Void Collective did not know what was coming toward them. They had never met humans before. They had never seen human ships. They had never learned what it meant to face an enemy that had nothing to lose and everything to prove. In the darkness of space, the universe was about to change, and it would be changed by the most dangerous species in any galaxy. Humans who had been given a reason to fight. The shipyard above Earth glowed with activity. The USS Prometheus sat in the dry dock like a sleeping giant. She was 3 kilometers long from nose to tail. Her hull was made of materials that could withstand the pressure of stars and the heat of weapons fire. She was the first true dreadnought that humanity had ever built, and now, for the first time, she would be sent to war. Captain Minho walked through the corridors of his ship. He was a young man, only 40 years old, but his face showed the strength and certainty of a soldier born for command. Every wall he passed seemed to pulse with power. Every system hummed with readiness. This was his ship, and he knew every part of her like he knew his own body. In the engineering section deep below the main deck, Chief Engineer Su Jin stood before a massive reactor. It was a fusion core, burning deuterium and tritium at temperatures that rivaled the surface of stars. This was the heart that would power everything. The weapons, the shields, the engines that would push a 3-kilometer vessel across the stars faster than anything the galaxy had ever seen. Su Jin was a woman who talked to her machines like they were living things. She placed her hand on the cold metal of the reactor chamber. "We are going to war, old friend," she said to the reactor. "Keep me strong. Keep us all alive out there." Admiral Jiwoo stood in the command center of Earth's naval forces. Around him were screens showing 12 cruisers being fueled, 28 destroyers being armed, and 50 support vessels being loaded with supplies. This was the largest fleet that humanity had ever assembled for war. In total, 5 dreadnoughts, massive ships like the Prometheus, would lead the way. "Status report," Jiwoo said. Analyst Yejun stepped forward. He was a thin man with quick eyes that could see patterns in numbers faster than most people could think. "Admiral, the fleet is 93% ready. All weapon systems are charged. All AI processors are running their final checks. We can depart in 4 hours. 4 hours, Jiwoo repeated. The Void Collective will not be expecting us for at least 2 weeks. This is good. We will arrive when their defenses are weakest." "Sir," said Yejun carefully, "I must say this. We are entering unknown space. We do not know exactly what we will face. Our calculations show that the Void Collective has 5,000 ships defending their frontier. We are bringing 146 ships total." "Yes," said Jiwoo. He was not worried. "But our ships are better. Our weapons are better, and our people are better trained. Quantity is one thing. Quality is another thing entirely." Captain Minho received the final order to launch. He sat in his command chair on the bridge of the Prometheus. Around him were hundreds of officers and soldiers, each one ready for battle. The ship's AI called Artemis spoke in a calm female voice. "All systems ready, Captain. We are cleared to depart." Min-ho looked at the view screen. Behind his ship, 49 other vessels waited for his signal. He pressed a button on his armrest. "All ships, this is the Prometheus. Begin departure sequence. I repeat, begin departure sequence." The engines of the Dreadnoughts powered up. The sound was like thunder rolling across the stars. The massive ships began to move, pulling away from Earth and Mars. They accelerated smoothly, faster and faster, until they reached the point where they could engage their jump drives. The jump drives were based on technology that had been stolen and borrowed from ancient alien designs, then improved by human scientists. They could punch a hole through space itself and travel between the stars in seconds instead of weeks. Sujin watched the reactor from her station in engineering. The power levels climbed higher and higher. Every dial moved into the green. Every reading showed perfect function. She whispered a prayer to her ancestors and held her breath as the ship made the jump to hyperspace. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Then space twisted around the Prometheus and she was somewhere else entirely. The stars looked different now. The planets were arranged in ways that Earth scientists had never seen. This was the Kepler sector, and the war was close now. Admiral Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the command ship and watched the fleet emerge from their jumps. All 146 vessels appeared in perfect formation. No accidents, no ships lost. Everything was exactly as it should be. "Send the message to Commander Teo," Jiwoo ordered. "Tell him we are here. Tell him to tell the Alliance that humanity has arrived." The message was sent across normal space on a narrow beam of radio waves. When it arrived at the Alliance station, it caused shock and confusion. 146 ships was not a small group. 146 ships was an invasion force. 146 ships was an army. Commander Teo read the message and his purple skin seemed to glow. Minister Harry stood beside him and allowed herself a small smile. "What did I tell you?" she said. "Humans do not do small. They do everything big." The Void Collective learned about the human arrival through their sensor networks. Their commanders laughed when they received the report. 146 ships against 5,000? This was not a challenge. This was a joke. But Vice Admiral Kroll, who commanded the Void Collective fleet in the Kepler sector, was a creature who had never seen a human ship before. He had conquered through superior numbers and superior tactics. He had never met an enemy whose individual ships were stronger than his entire fleet. He ordered his commanders to prepare for battle. He wanted to see these humans. He wanted to crush them, and he wanted to send a message back to the Alliance species that no one could help them, that the Void Collective was eternal, that resistance was pointless. On the Prometheus, Captain Min-ho prepared his crew for battle. Every soldier was suited up. Every weapon was armed. Every defense shield was powered to maximum. This was what they had trained for their entire lives. This was the purpose that had driven them to the stars. Sujin sat in engineering and watched the reactor pulse with power. She could feel the ship coming alive beneath her feet. The Prometheus was not just a machine anymore. She was a weapon. She was a tool of war. She was the answer to the universe's question. What happens when you give humans the power to fight? Engineer Sujin sent a message to Captain Min-ho through the communication system. "All systems green, Captain. The Prometheus is ready to bring death to anyone who stands against us." Min-ho received the message in his command chair and nodded. He looked at the view screen where the stars hung like diamonds on black velvet. Somewhere out there, the Void Collective waited. They did not know what was coming toward them. They did not know about human ingenuity, human determination, and human brutality in war. They would learn very soon. Very, very soon they would learn what it meant to face an enemy that did not stop, did not surrender, and did not feel mercy when it came time to fight. The fleet moved forward into the darkness, and the stars seemed to hold their breath. History was about to be made in the Kepler sector. History was about to be written in blood and plasma and light. The first contact alarm sounded on the bridge of the Prometheus. Lieutenant Park Soo sat at his tactical station, watching the screens light up with enemy signatures. Thousands of them. The Void Collective fleet was moving toward the human position like a great wave of metal and death. "Contact," Park Soo called out. "Multiple targets bearing 035 Mark 10. Distance 500,000 kilometers and closing." Captain Min-ho leaned forward in his command chair. His hands gripped the armrests. This was the moment he had prepared for his entire life. This was the moment that would define him as a commander or destroy him as a failure. "Red alert," he said calmly. "All hands to battle stations. Charge all weapons. Raise shields to maximum. And someone tell me exactly how many ships we are facing." The bridge became a storm of activity. Officers moved between stations. Lights flashed on every console. The Prometheus hummed with the energy of a warship preparing for battle. Park Su's fingers flew across his tactical console. "Counting 1,600 enemy ships in the first wave, Captain. More signatures appearing every second. Total estimate. At least 3,000 vessels closing toward our position. 3-to-1 odds. Those were bad odds for most species. But humans understood odds. Humans understood how to beat odds." Admiral Jiwoo stood on the command bridge of his flagship, the USS Seoul. Around him, screens showed the positions of every ship in the human fleet. Green dots for human vessels, red dots for Void Collective enemies. The red dots were many. So very many. "All captains," Jiwoo said into the communication network, his voice steady and clear. "This is Admiral Jiwoo. We are about to engage the enemy. Remember your training. Remember why we are here. We are here to win. We are here to show this galaxy what humans can do, fire at will, and make every shot count." The first shots came from the human ships, not from weapons like other species used. These were railguns, metal projectiles accelerated to speed so fast that they carried more power than nuclear bombs. These were laser cannons that could burn through armor in seconds. These were missiles with targeting systems that could follow an enemy through twisting turns and impossible angles. The first Void Collective ship to be hit simply exploded. One moment it was there. The next moment it was scattered across space in 1,000 glowing pieces. Then another ship exploded. Then another. Then dozens. Vice Admiral Kroll watched from his command center as his fleet began to die. He could not believe what he was seeing. His ships were supposed to be strong. His ships were supposed to be weapons. But they were dying like flowers in a fire. His weapons were not even hurting the human ships. "Return fire," he commanded. "All ships open fire on the human dreadnoughts." The Void Collective unleashed everything they had. Thousands of weapons fired at once. The sky between the two fleets filled with energy and light and death, but the human shields held. The Prometheus took hits, massive hits that would have destroyed ships from other species. The impact rocked the bridge. People fell. Alarms screamed through every corridor. Sujin gripped the side of her engineering station to keep from falling. The reactor wobbled, but it did not fail. The shields held. The ship held. "Captain?" Park Su's voice came through the speaking system, tight with control. "Shields holding at 79%. Main hull integrity still at 95%. We can take more." Minho allowed himself a small smile. "Then let us give them more." "Fire all weapons," he commanded. "I want concentrated fire on those command ships. If we can kill the leaders, the rest will fall apart." The Prometheus transformed into an engine of destruction. Her weapon systems, powered by Sujin's massive reactor, unleashed firepower unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Plasma bolts the size of mountains streamed from her cannons. Railgun projectiles moved so fast they left trails in space. Missiles jumped from their launchers like angry wasps, each one seeking out an enemy target. The sky turned red, not red like blood, red like the heat of 1,000,000 fires, red like the color of plasma burning at temperatures that would melt stone. The Void Collective command ship, the largest vessel in their fleet, took a direct hit from a human missile. The explosion was so bright that it lit up the entire sector. When the light faded, nothing remained. No wreckage, no survivors, just empty space where a warship had been. Scholar Haina watched from the Alliance observation station. Her eyes were wide. Her hand trembled as she activated the broadcast system that reached every world in the Alliance. Every species would see what she was seeing. "The humans are firing," she said, her voice shaking with wonder and terror. "The sky is turning red. The Void Collective is dying. The humans they are not stopping. They are not showing mercy. They are ending this." The battle continued for 4 hours. In those 4 hours, the human fleet destroyed 3,000 ships. The Void Collective lost 70% of their forces. Entire fleets were erased from existence. Entire command structures were annihilated. The admirals and generals who had conquered 15 star systems were dead or dying or running away. Vice Admiral Kroll gave the order to retreat. It was the first time in his entire military career that he had ever run from a battle. His ships, the ones that had survived, gathered together and made a jump to hyperspace. They fled like wounded animals running from a predator. The human fleet did not chase them. There was no need. The battle was over. The Void Collective had been defeated so completely and so thoroughly that they would never be the same. On the bridge of the Prometheus, Captain Minho looked at his tactical display. All the red dots were gone or fleeing. Only green dots remained. "Damage report," he said, though his voice sounded very far away now, like he was speaking through water. "Minor damage to shields," Park Soo responded. "Main hull shows some external scarring. 3 people wounded in the lower decks from a shockwave. Engineering reports the reactor is still running at perfect efficiency." "Captain, we did it. We won." Minho sat back in his command chair. He was tired. He was numb. He had just led a fleet to the most complete and total victory in human history. And he did not feel like a hero. He felt like someone who had seen the darkness inside himself, and found that darkness to be powerful and efficient and willing to do whatever was necessary to win. Soo Jin was crying in engineering. She was crying because the reactor was still singing, still burning, still powerful. She was crying because her ship had not broken. She was crying because so many people had died in the darkness above, and she could not stop thinking about them. Admiral Jiwoo stood on his bridge and made the decision that would echo across the stars. He opened a channel to the Void Collective's remaining leadership. "This is Admiral Jiwoo of the Human Forces," he said simply. "Your fleet is destroyed. Your people are defeated. You have 2 choices. You can surrender and live, or you can fight and die. Choose now." The response came within minutes. The Void Collective wanted to negotiate. The Void Collective wanted to surrender. The Void Collective wanted to live. The sky had turned red and it had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same. The surrender negotiations took place on a neutral station orbiting a dead planet. The Void Collective sent General Daejung, their highest remaining leader. He was a massive creature with armor made of black metal, and eyes that held nothing but cold mathematics. He had conquered 10 star systems. He had killed billions. And now he sat across from a human diplomat named Min Seo, and prepared to negotiate the end of everything his empire had built. Min Seo was a woman in her 50s, with silver streaking her black hair. She had negotiated trade agreements and peace treaties on Earth. But this was different. This was about the future of an entire region of space. This was about deciding who would rule and who would obey. Admiral Jiwoo's orders to Min Seo had been very simple. "Get us everything we can, but make sure they understand the cost of refusal." Min Seo looked at General Daejung across the table. "The terms are not complex," she said, speaking in the standard galactic language that all species understood. "First, you will withdraw all military forces from every system you have conquered. Second, you will return all resources and technology that you have stolen. Third, you will accept an occupation force until we are confident that you will not threaten anyone again. Fourth, you will pay reparations to every species that you have harmed." Daejung listened without moving. His face showed no emotion. When Min Seo finished, he spoke in a voice that sounded like metal grinding against metal. "If I refuse these terms?" Min Seo smiled. Not a kind smile. A cold smile. "Then Admiral Jiwoo will destroy everything you have left. He will hunt your ships across the stars. He will bomb your worlds. He will make sure that the Void Collective becomes something that children whisper about in nightmares. A warning about what happens when you resist the humans. And if I accept?" "Then you live," said Min Seo. "Your people live. Your culture continues. You become a managed power rather than an expanding threat. You can rebuild, but only in ways that we approve. You can expand, but only in directions that we allow. You will be constrained, but you will not be erased." General Daejung was quiet for a long time. Around them, guards stood motionless. Outside the window, the stars hung in the darkness like frozen tears. "I accept the terms," Daejung said finally. "I have no choice. But I want you to know something, human. Your people are dangerous, more dangerous than you understand. You do not think like other species. You do not have honor. You do not have mercy. You simply destroy until the problem is solved. That makes you very efficient. That also makes you something that other species will fear and eventually resist. Then we will deal with that when it comes," said Min Seo. "Until then, welcome to the new order." The message of Void Collective surrender reached every corner of the galaxy within hours. The unified alliance of lesser races held celebrations on 1,000 worlds. The war was over. The threat was ended. Humanity had saved them, but not everyone was celebrating. Commander Teo stood in his office with Minister Hyrie. They were looking at reports from across the Allied sectors. The mood was changing. Gratitude was mixing with something else, something darker, fear. Listen to what the silicates are saying, Hyrie said, reading from a datapad. They are calling for limits on human military expansion. They want to know why we need so many warships if the war is over. Fear, said Teo. Fear changes everything. We were afraid of the Void Collective yesterday. Today we are afraid of our saviors. It is natural, Hyrie said. You replace one dominant power with another, and you simply trade problems. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss Earth's role in the new order. It was a tense meeting. The Valorians wanted humanity as an ally, but wanted limits on their power. The Krons wanted humanity to stay and protect them forever. The silicates wanted humanity to leave and never return. Admiral Jiwoo was called to speak before the council. He arrived in person, leaving his fleet in orbit around the primary world of the Alliance. He was old now, older than anyone expected. The battle had aged him. Killing always ages people, no matter who is doing it. I am here to tell you that Earth will remain, Jiwoo said. Not to conquer, not to rule, but to maintain the peace that we have created. The Void Collective will be watched. Other threats will be dealt with the same way we dealt with this threat. You asked for help. You asked for humans. Now you have us. Learn to live with that. What if we do not want this help anymore? Asked one of the Zephyr representatives. Then you are free to tell us to leave, said Jiwoo. And we will go back to Earth. And when the next threat comes, and there will be a next threat, you will face it alone. Choose wisely. The council did not ask them to leave. Back on Earth, the government began making plans to expand the fleet. 5 dreadnoughts had been enough to save the galaxy. 10 dreadnoughts would be better. 20 dreadnoughts would be ideal. New shipyards were built. New weapons were designed. New soldiers were trained. Captain Minho became a hero on Earth. Children wore clothes with his face on them. Old people told stories about how he had commanded the Prometheus in the battle where the sky turned red. He was offered a promotion to admiral, but he refused. He wanted to stay with his ship. He wanted to stay with the Prometheus. Sujin continued to maintain the reactor, but something inside her had changed. She had felt the power of human weapons. She had felt the Prometheus transform into an instrument of death. She had felt what it meant to be part of a killing machine. Every day she went to engineering, and every day she wondered if what they had done was right or wrong or something too complex to name. Dr. Kwansu studied the reports of the battle for months. She wrote papers about human military tactics, human psychology and warfare, human adaptability to new situations. Her work was read by every military academy in the galaxy. Other species wanted to understand how humans thought. They wanted to understand what made them so effective at killing. The answer was simple but terrifying. Humans had no limitations. They did not fight for honor. They did not fight for tradition. They fought to win. They fought because winning was the only acceptable outcome, and they were willing to do anything, change anything, become anything in pursuit of that win. Scholar Haina finished writing her account of the war. It was a massive document, thousands of pages long. It would be studied for centuries. It would teach other species about the day that the sky turned red. It would warn them about what happened when you asked humans for help. The final chapter of her work contained a question. Humanity came with dreadnoughts when we asked for help. What will they bring next, and to whom? Minister Hyrie read those words and shivered. She was a human, and she was afraid of humanity. That seemed wrong somehow. But then again, everything about this situation seemed wrong. She walked to the window of the observation station and looked at the space where the battle had happened. The destroyed ships had been moved to a graveyard orbit, a place where the wreckage of the dead floated forever as a monument to what had been lost. The Void Collective was defeated. The immediate threat was gone. But the real question now was whether humanity had saved the galaxy or conquered it, and whether those two things were really so different after all. The stars continued to burn in the darkness, indifferent to the struggles of the small creatures who crawled across their systems, making war and peace and trying to understand their place in the vast, uncaring universe. 6 months after the battle, the stars had begun to forget. Not truly forget, but to settle into a new rhythm. The red that had filled the sky had faded. The wreckage had been cleared away. The dead had been counted and mourned. The Kepler sector had become a place of change and tension. Humanity maintained a presence. The Dreadnoughts remained in orbit around the main worlds of the Alliance, not threatening, but always there. Always watching. Always ready. Minister Hayri stood before the United Earth government, preparing to give her report on the mission to the galaxy. She had been away from her homeworld for 8 months. She had seen things that would stay with her forever. She had learned truths about her own species that were not comfortable to know. The mission was successful, she told the government leaders. The Void Collective has been defeated. The allied species are secure. Humanity's military power has been established across the galactic region. We are now recognized as a major force. And the cost? Asked one of the elder council members. The cost is that we are now feared, Hayri said. Fear creates respect, but it also creates enemies. The other species are already beginning to organize against us. Not openly, but they are talking. They are wondering if they need to build their own weapons to protect themselves from humanity. We have created a new kind of balance in the galaxy, but it is a balance based on fear rather than trust. The council members looked at each other. They were not unhappy with this outcome. Humanity had wanted power, and now humanity had it. But Hayri could see in their eyes that they understood the cost. Power always had a cost. Admiral Jiwoo had retired from active service. He spent his days in a small house on the coast of what used to be called the Pacific Ocean. He watched the waves crash against the rocks and thought about all the ships he had commanded, all the people he had ordered into battle, all the decisions he had made that had changed the course of history. One day, a young officer came to visit him. Her name was Captain Park Hee, and she had been assigned to oversee the newest Dreadnought class that was being built. She wanted to learn from Jiwoo. She wanted to understand what it meant to be a commander of great power. Do you regret what you did? She asked him. The battle? The conquest? Jiwoo was quiet for a long time, watching the waves. Regret is a feeling for people who do not have to make decisions, he said finally. I made the choices that I could make with the information that I had. If I had not done what I did, the Alliance species would have been destroyed. The Void Collective would have consumed the entire sector. So no, I do not regret. But I also do not take pleasure in what happened. I take responsibility. That is the burden of command. Captain Minho had become something between a hero and a symbol. He was the face of human military power. He was the man who had commanded the ship that killed more enemies than any human had ever killed before. He was 30 years old, and already he felt ancient. The Prometheus was in dry dock now, being fitted with new weapons and new systems. Minho walked through her corridors every day, remembering the moment when those corridors had shaken with the power of weapons fire. He placed his hand on walls that had been scarred by the heat of battle. Sujin was with him most days, overseeing the repairs and improvements. She had become quieter over the months. The brightness that had been in her eyes before the battle had faded. She had seen what humans could do when they truly wanted to destroy something. The new reactor will be 3 times more powerful, she told Minho one day, pointing at the massive equipment being installed. The new guns will fire faster and hit harder. The new shields will be stronger. When the Prometheus launches again, she will be the most powerful warship ever built. Will she also be more accurate at killing people? Minho asked. It was not what he meant to say. The words came out before he could stop them. Sujin looked at him. Yes, she said simply. That is what more power always means. More killing. On the station in the Kepler sector, Scholar Haina was preparing a new broadcast. She had been invited to speak to universities and academies across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to know about the battle. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened and why. Her words would reach billions of beings on 1,000 worlds. She would tell them about the human ships and the human weapons and the human determination to win. She would tell them about the moment when the sky turned red. She would tell them about what it meant to be saved by a species that did not understand mercy. The humans came to help us, she would say, but they helped us in a way that showed us what truly powerful beings can do. They did not negotiate with the Void Collective. They did not compromise with them. They erased them from the sky. Some of us call this salvation. Some of us call it something else. But all of us understand that the galaxy will never be the same. The Void Collective still existed, but they existed in a diminished state. Their territories were limited. Their military forces were restricted. Humans orbited their worlds to ensure compliance. The great empire had become a managed state, neither destroyed nor truly independent. General Daejung lived, but he lived in a way that was worse than death for a warrior. He lived in limitation. He lived in constraint. He lived knowing that his power had been taken from him by a species that did not follow the rules he had understood his entire life. On Earth, Dr. Kwon Soo published her final paper on human military psychology. It was a thick document, filled with data and analysis and conclusions that would shape how other species understood humanity. Humans are different, she wrote in the conclusion. They do not have the honor codes of other warrior species. They do not have the built-in limitations that evolution has given other predators. When humans decide to fight, they fight to completely destroy their enemies. They will use any weapon, accept any cost, change any belief if it means victory. This makes them terrifying to fight. This also makes them valuable as allies as long as you are not their enemy. The question now is whether the galaxy can maintain a peaceful coexistence with a species that is so fundamentally different from everyone else. It was a good question. A question that had no answer yet. Captain Min Ho stood on the dock of the shipyard one final time before the Prometheus was launched again. The ship had been transformed. She looked more powerful now, more dangerous. She looked like what she truly was, the spearhead of human military might. Sujin stood beside him. They did not speak. They did not need to. They understood each other without words now. They had shared something that would bind them forever. They had participated in something historic. They had been part of the moment when everything changed. The Prometheus was launched back into space. She took her place at the head of the human fleet. Behind her came the other dreadnoughts, the cruisers, the destroyers, the support vessels. 146 ships had arrived to save the galaxy 6 months ago. Now there were more. Now there were always more. The galaxy looked at these ships and wondered what would come next. Would humans remain as protectors? Would they become conquerors? Would they eventually do to all the galaxy what they had done to the Void Collective? No one knew the answer. And that uncertainty was perhaps the most terrifying thing of all. On every world, in every species, the question was asked in different ways, but it was always the same question. What do we do about humanity? The stars burned in the darkness, indifferent to these questions. They had burned for billions of years before humanity arrived, and they would burn for billions of years after humans were gone. But for now, for this moment in time, the galaxy belonged to the species that had learned to turn the sky red, and the sky would stay red. It would stay red for a very, very long time.